Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fully Managed Podcast, the podcast where we discuss marketing and business tips to help assist you on your business journeys. I'm your host, Shannon, Penji's Partnership Coordinator, and I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Nick Lynch from Kaleidoscope. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Thank you. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? What you do now, your history to what you do now, and everything that you're looking forward to the future.
Yeah, for sure. That's everything wrapped in a bow, right? So, I'm Nick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Kaleidoscope IO. Kaleidoscope is essentially, people call us the Deloitte for social good. So anytime media, marketing, and measurement occur for social impact, whether that's on the nonprofit side or the for-profit side, we provide really specialized media marketing, measuring, and measurement solutions across the board for any size organization or any type of organization. We started Kaleidoscope in like the early days of the pandemic in 2020. I mean, just for context, my background, I've been here in LA for about 20 years, really focused on marketing, advertising, technology, building solutions for brands and advertisers to better target their audiences on digital and social media. Can't really tell, but I got some gray hair. I've been around a while. My first job was MySpace. So like there's been a long time of understanding social media.
Your first job be MySpace is a really awesome cred to have, because most people are like, I grew up with MySpace, but the job wasn't there. That's kind of awesome.
But it also kind of dates me. Like, I'm an old guy. But from a personal standpoint, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a Make-A-Wish kid. I went to Disneyland when I was 3, when I was sick, and I've been a part of the Make-A-Wish family ever since. Really involved with the LA chapter for the last 10 years. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when things started to shut down, people couldn't do in-person events or see each other in person. The first thing I thought of was, what are nonprofits going to do now that they can't do in-person events? Of the vast majority of nonprofits earn the vast majority of their money or their revenue through in-person events, people to people, sort of talking and learning about mission, and then ultimately donating. And so I knew that was going to be a big challenge for the space. And with my background in marketing, and at the time I had been an early adopter of influencer marketing, kind of the early days of the creator economy. And I knew that if I could align nonprofits, corporate partners, and creators or social media influencers where there was vision and value alignment, that I could create some really cool activations and some amplification of mission sort of during this time where people couldn't connect in person. And that was the early stages of Kaleidoscope. We saw that worked really well. It was very effective. Everybody won in terms of getting great visibility, awareness, activation, engagement, all the fun things that you think about from a marketing and a mission perspective. And that was the kind of the genesis of Kaleidoscope. So we built some tools and technology and some solutions to connect those 3 stakeholders. And over time, it became this opportunity to not only connect those 3 stakeholders, but also provide a full suite of services around media marketing and measurement for the impact space. And so we're over year 5 now, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And as we look kind of the future, it's really thinking about, how can we continue to leverage these really unique and exciting opportunities in new media, social media, for the creator economy, and just sort of anything visual or engaging that we can really bring people together to amplify social impact.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredible. And it's really lovely to have noticed like a problem that would affect nonprofits, and not just like this, that COVID affected everyone negatively,
Sure.
But nonprofits, one that get so much of their money from in-person events and also from federal funding, which was messed up at the time as well.
Yeah.
And now,
Right. Especially now.
But it is great that you noticed a problem and we're actively trying to shoot to fix it. And what I'm curious about is, so you emphasize a lot that partnerships are really valuable for nonprofits. And I think, at least with my experience with nonprofits, that some of them are hesitant to have corporate partnerships because of, possibly them dictating what they're supposed to do, or maybe not aligning with their values, or finding out that, they're not as aligned later in their kind of relationship than they do in the beginning. What kind of things do you think about when setting up partners and creating relationships with certain people that are going to work with nonprofits?
Sure. It's a good question. And it kind of ties into a little bit of what you just said about funding in general. And I think that nonprofits historically, and this is just not their fault, this is just the way that sort of the industry thinks about it. It's kind of scarcity mindset is like, how do I get to the dollar as fast as possible? And what I've learned in general from a marketing and a branding perspective, but particularly over the last 5 to 10 years in the nonprofit space, is it's really trying to figure out how do you create all of these micro mutually beneficial opportunities, meaning that whether it's a small opportunity for a donor to feel like they have real ownership and real contribution to the mission and figuring out what that means for them, right? That's a mutually beneficial opportunity where they feel good. You feel good as a nonprofit because you're actually able to secure dollars and then execute on the mission. It could be a corporate partner that is really focused, like in LA, like the homeless and the unhoused situation is a very challenging situation in LA. And so there may be a business that is hyper focused on how do they support that space. And so you really need to figure out, as an organization that is supporting people in that space, what would be a mutually beneficial situation, event, relationship, whatever interaction that may be with the corporate partner, so that they understand that they're getting corporate value and impact value. And then the mission itself is also getting that impact value as well. So for me, it's always about figuring out what those micro moments of mutually beneficial opportunities are. Micro moments, mutual. Yeah. Right. So like, that's my whole thing, is like, it's not about rushing to get a dollar or rushing to build a partnership. It's really about what are those micro mutually beneficial moments that we can collectively build on to build a long-term relationship that scales. And I think that, to me, is a big mindset shift, especially in the nonprofit space. But those are those tiny moments that add up to sustainability for organizations that are really trying to figure out, how do I survive in a dynamic funding scenario like what's happening right now or during the pandemic. And so if you've been able to build your organization with hundreds or thousands of these micro mutually beneficial moments, it builds a really strong foundation for people to kick in when you need it most, or people that you can rely on most, as opposed to building a transactional organization, which, again, that's the way we live in a world of transactional opportunity. I mean, it happens. And you can also build sustainable relationships that have those mutual beneficial opportunities and integrations that really build sustainable, scalable relationships.
No, I like the focus on mutual beneficial relationships because I think that it's something that is more realistic, to put it that way, if that makes sense, because businesses often aren't doing things. I would say, I mean, there are businesses out there that are doing things out of the goodness of their heart and that they care, and but also businesses are constantly worried about funding, like it with money coming in. And so it makes sense that when they do interact with nonprofits, regardless of whether they actually, like, their motive is to do something out of the kindness of their heart, it makes sense that, like, they're getting something back, because that is kind of like what is, that's how people think in the business world, I think, at least I find. And so it's not necessarily that maybe people, sometimes people don't have the ability to do something out of the kindness of their heart with nothing in return, because, they need customers, they need whatever it
Sure.
may be.
I mean, the realities is that it is as well intended as all of us are, is particularly if you own a business. There are people called chief financial officers who don't necessarily look at the emotional aspects of a business, but are really looking at a spreadsheet and all the dollars that are coming in supporting the dollars that are going out. And so that has to be part of an equation for when you're working with anybody. And I think that, again, an individual donor or a person, or whether that's an organization or corporation, really figuring out where those mutually beneficial opportunities are. And they don't need to be tangible dollars. They can be
Mhm.
something else that a corporation is looking for, or a business is looking for, or a family or a person. All of those things, like, there are opportunities in areas outside of transactional tangible dollars that derive benefit for a person, a place, a business, a family, a group, anybody. And so it's really just being really intentional and thinking about those things, having those conversations with potential or future partners that then allow you to be able to actually build those unique experiences or opportunities that, again, build that really strong foundation for scale.
Yeah, I love that, because it is something that, I think that a lot of businesses or corporations or whatever it may be that, maybe want to get involved with a nonprofit or nonprofits, they think about it like I have to donate money, but that's not always what's most helpful. I mean, like, especially like it's like throwing money at a problem. It's not necessarily like if you do something that a nonprofit needs, like your business does something that is helpful to a nonprofit directly, like the work that you do or the service that you provide, it almost makes more sense to just help doing that because even if they have the money, sometimes like they have to hire someone to do this, train them, and like that takes time. And what nonprofits don't have, along with money, is time.
Yeah,
And
most nonprofits are extremely resource restrained. And
Mhm.
not to sound corny, but I did write a book that came out last year that specifically talks about what you're highlighting, which is the three T's: time, talent, or treasure. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a treasure that you're contributing to or participating with an organization with, right? Time is extremely valuable for everybody and figuring out how you can leverage time or your talent. There's so many amazing, talented people that can provide so much to any impact organization. And so either one of those three T's can be really effective and impactful. And again, thinking about how you integrate or in a, intertwine what you're doing with what an organization is trying to accomplish.
yeah, and doing a partnership like that takes away that, I guess, fear that some businesses have that like they're wasting money on something too, as well as like they can do something beneficial that like makes them feel good if that's what they're needing or whatever it may be. But it also provides value to the nonprofit and doesn't take much away from them most of the time. And I
For
think
sure.
that's something that's the ideal move for a business in which whether their motives are selfish or not, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, because it's you're helping someone. If you're doing it publicly, people see that you're helping someone. And you also have the ability to not necessarily like lose anything from doing that. It's more something that if you're already providing a service and just doing this as taking minimal resources, if you are like on a grand scale or something like that, then it's like a no-brainer almost to me.
Yeah. Well, and look, also the thing that is my sincerest hope in coming into providing and supporting the impact space is that I can enable leadership in impact organizations to kind of zoom out, right, a little bit and stop necessarily thinking about like the mid to the bottom part of what needs to be accomplished, but really think strategically about how are we connecting? Like, what are we actually accomplishing in building storytelling and narrative and relationships that elicit people to want to participate and utilize their time, talent, and treasure, right? It's not just like, are we executing the mission, which is obviously why organization exists, but
Mhm.
laddering up to a much larger and broader strategy about how we're eliciting these feelings, these intentions, and the excitement and the want to be a part of your mission in some way, time, talent, or treasure, right?
Yeah, no, I think that those are um I like that you have like a model for something. I I think that it puts it much clearer of like what people need to keep in mind when going about their work. But I think it's very important to factor in all of those carefully as a nonprofit because there's so many even in my Unix nonprofits that I've worked with in the past I see have like descaled not wanting to because of like certain things like this. A lot of it is funding, but I also think that partnerships are crucial for nonprofits in this way because it keeps people say they don't know about your nonprofit, but they know about this other nonprofit that you're working with, or they know about this business that you're working with.
Yep.
A lot of that is just being known is being helpful because people can fight for you when you're not when you're about to go under or something that and like realize that, oh, this nonprofit wasn't part of a program that I was a part of. Like I wasn't directly a part of the nonprofit itself, but I took part in this. I remember how great this was. Like I want to continue to do that. Like it's the simplest things of like maybe they don't have to do something so like for longevity purposes, but
Sure.
something that even as small as like a program or like taking a part in something that they're doing is extremely helpful just to create more relationships. Like the more people that know about you as a nonprofit, the more helpful it is for situations like that, especially COVID there, where, we need as much help as we can get. We need numbers.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I live in LA, so there's a lot of pretty large nonprofits here, and they're all kind of comparing against each other. They're all, well, these guys are doing this, these are doing that. And my question is always about, like, how are you creating awareness for what you're doing? How are you building, and creating connections for the mission that you're trying to accomplish? How are you communicating the value of the other people's participation in that, right? And so kind of putting all of that together into a big like awareness and engagement soup, right? To really figure out what it is that you're accomplishing. And you may be one of the largest, most well-known organizations in the country that has an office in LA. But if you're not doing the basic things of building human connection and supporting that connection with your mission, it doesn't really matter how big you are and how well known you are, particularly in your community or in your city. You're going to find challenges in accomplishing what you want to do from a purely time, talent, and treasure perspective, because you just haven't done the basic work of building that foundation.
Yeah, exactly. I think that building that foundation is really important as well for situations in which, like, for example, many nonprofits more recently have been, caught, so to speak, for, embezzling money or taking too much money at the top or whatever it may be that people's opinions are factoring in. And it's like, if you have, some of these are hearsay, I think, or like people not factoring in like funding models and how much someone at a certain position like normally gets in another area or whatever it may be, or like what is a fair salary. But then there are grossly increased salaries that don't make sense. I think that when you have a community based backing, like people understand the work that you've done for them, when there's like a debate over this, there's people to defend that organization in that case of like, maybe this isn't true. And people are debating over something that isn't fair or whatever it may be. Or like if there's a scandal or something like that where people are thinking of this organization in a bad light. If you're actively throughout your entire process helping people on the ground and you make these connections with people and you have these friendships and these partnerships and these relationships, then it's more likely that you'll be uplifted in those situations rather than not. Obviously, I would hope that it's not happening if you're actually doing bad stuff. But more often than not, I feel like sometimes there's a lot of criticism towards nonprofits that sometimes isn't like people aren't completely aware of like the entire structure of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes one bad actor to sort of poison the water. I mean, the truth is that yes, nonprofits, the only difference between a for-profit and nonprofits is literally the tax code, right? Like there's no shareholders that get dividends at the end of every year in a nonprofit. That's the only difference. So nonprofits are still very much a business. And yes, do people start a 501c3 and then abuse the tax status for their own? Absolutely. But the vast majority, like 99.99% of organizations are built to do good, intend to do good, and are mission focused and are not self-serving. And it's just unfortunate that one bad actor can sort of pollute the whole thing. The one thing I will say that I believe is really important to always remember is that real people are doing real things, and real people deserve real wages. And I think that has been a challenge that this space has had in terms of how people should be fairly compensated. And unfortunately, even in organizations that are really well funded, people are not actually paid remotely close to what they could be paid in a for-profit business, which again, the only difference is the tax code. And so I think a lot of work has to be done about how people are treated in these organizations from a humanity perspective. I think that I could make the argument that the same people that an organization serves and how in high regard that they are trying to accomplish, the people that are actually doing the work should be looked at the very same and should be compensated fairly. And so I agree. It's unfortunate that, again, these sort of one-offs make the perception the way that it is. But I think there a lot of work needs to be done around supporting the people within these organizations and using that sort of that mentality or that theory about how you treat your people as an additional connection piece to the people that you want to support your organization. If you can tout how well you treat your people and why you treat your people this way, I don't think it's PR. I think it's important to share that and communicate that from a transparency perspective. And if you share that, that is an additional reason why people would want to support your organization. So I think that's something to think about. Again, I think people think too transactionally and try to figure out like, this is our mission. Can you give us $1? This is what the dollar does. It's important to be able to communicate that stuff, and that's going to happen. But again, think about holistically about your organization and the value that the people inside it are creating and communicating that value back to your supporters so that they can feel good about an additional data point of why they can feel good about supporting or donating or participating in the organization.
Yeah, because people recognize, like, especially the group that's being helped by the organization, remember relationships like and dynamics of like situations better than they might know exactly what the money is going towards, so to speak. Like they remember a worker that helped them before they remember like this whatever systems that's in place that are being paid for by whatever the funding is for the organization. Like most of them might not even know what's going on behind the scenes that's creating the like helpful things or tools or resources that is helping them in that situation. So
yeah,
you want like not only to help people, but you also want like that you want to see that you want to be able to see like the effect that you have on the ground. And I completely agree that there is like a taboo, I guess, around like what people should be paid in nonprofits and what's unfair and what's not. I've seen funding models for a bunch of nonprofits. I took a really awesome class in college that was a nonprofit, like just for nonprofits. It was awesome. It was very eye opening. But the idea that it's people work themselves to the bone in nonprofits. Maybe not all of them, but I would say the majority of them, and do not get paid the same way as like maybe someone with a 9-to-5. Obviously, there's so much disparity in wages, but and it's like unacceptable for the CEO of or whatever they may be called, for a nonprofit to make like 100K or something like that. But like a CEO of another company would maybe be making more than that. If they're doing the same job, yeah, it sounds bad that, you know, what that part of that money could go to those people, but this person's working hard. Like they don't not deserve a fair wage if that's what they're getting paid laterally at another place. I don't understand. I think there's just like misconceptions around it that it's like, if you're doing kind of work, you should accept a pay deduction, but I don't think that's true at all.
100%. And I think the thing that people forget about is that, you know, real people do work at real companies, and the people that work in these types of mission driven or impact organizations, that they not only show up like physically, but their soul and their heart are also part of this equation. Yeah. Doing. And so there's a premium for that. If you want people to show up and put their heart and their soul into their work, do some people do that in a for-profit sort of situation? Sure. There are definitely people that are really passionate about what they do, and they'll bring their heart and their soul, and they're really passionate about it. But the vast majority of for-profit work does not include a person's heart and soul. Whereas impact-driven or social impact work, the vast majority of people that show up to work not only physically show up, but they're putting everything that they have in their soul into the work because they're super passionate about the outcomes that they're driving. And so there should be a premium for that, I believe.
No, yeah, exactly. I think it's also like to show up. There is a monetary value associated with like actively being present all the time. It is awful to be like a certain level of participation to be expected of you for your work, and know that you can't afford living. Like there shouldn't be. I think that so many people constantly like this rhetoric around nonprofits, and it's fair because that's the reality of it, is that like if you want to do this work, it's thankless, and that you're like the what you get out of it is helping people, and that's wonderful, but that's not enough sometimes, and that
No.
doesn't mean that you don't care enough, or that you're like a bad person for like wanting to be paid a certain level that's fair. That just means that, you know, you are able to do your best work when you're also stable at home. And that's something that's very, I hope that changes in the nonprofit world.
I do too. I think the challenge, and then the challenge I think in this space is that the dynamics are so focused in transactions that it's one of the only spaces that I've ever been in where every conversation, every conference, every thought leader, everything, anybody that's contributing to the conversation, it's all tactics. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You should be thinking about the CRM. You should be thinking about reoccurring giving. You should be thinking about donor advised funds, like all of these things. Again, all important things to consider. These are all really valuable tactics. You should be doing this on social media. I don't disagree with any of the pieces that are being contributed in the conversation, but I don't think I've yet to see a real specific conversation about how you develop a culture and a leadership model and a board model where you take the time to strategically think about what it is that your organization needs to accomplish and connect to people in your community. I honestly do not think enough effort is taken in that particular step. Once you've done that and you've taken the time to accomplish that, all the other things can be laddered in. Okay, great. We know we want to do X, Y, and Z in this community. We know that we need to reach these people in these ways. We need to talk to these people through these mediums in these ways. And ultimately that leads to increase in donor advised funds, or that leads to an increase in our reoccurring giving, or we, can build a community else, whatever it is, like those tactics can be plugged into a strategic model. But honestly, even in, conversations where people are thinking about 3-year and 5-year, strategic models, I rarely actually see those things actually be less tactical and more like, okay, big term thinking of like where the gaps are and how to accomplish it. And so I wish I had an answer for how that changes. And I think a lot of the argument is, well, we don't necessarily have the time or the luxury to do that, Nick, because guess what? We just lost 95% of our funding because the federal money that was supposed to come in is now it's right, and it's panic. And so again, I'm not trying to discredit anything in this space because it's really, really hard. And these are the realities of where we're at. My sincerest hope is that we can all sort of work together to figure out the solutions for how to be much more strategically minded at the top, and the relationship with boards and leadership to support a much more strategic mindset so that the tactics can be laddered in. And once those tactics get laddered in and they get optimized in and out, then the dollars will work. I just, that's how I've successfully seen businesses, and I've successfully scaled businesses and sold businesses, is like, you have to be really strategic, layer in those tactics, and then you optimize those tactics throughout the year. And then you see what you can accomplish. And ultimately it leads to success. And so that's kind of like when I think for the future and how I can provide some level of contribution to it is helping have those conversations, contribute to those conversations, and force those conversations to happen so that the amazing tactical pieces that all of these other people are talking about can actually be leveraged and utilized in a way that are effective, as opposed to like, oh gosh, we got to do this because everybody's talking about this, but like, maybe not. Like, why? How does that fit into a broader strategic plan for what you're trying to accomplish for your organization, for your people that support you, for your board, for your mission, right? And so I think all of those things, I think are super important.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that having partnerships in those situations are really helpful for eventually just making the numbers work, because you have different friends in different areas. And that's something that you don't have to think about like, oh, this department or this, whatever it may be. It's like, okay, I need this done. Let me figure this out with this person. And maybe it's low cost or no cost or whatever it may be, whatever that dynamic is. But I think like what might be wrong a lot of the time with these conversations is like that nonprofits often have to prove themselves. And so a lot of people that they're helping or whatever population that they're helping become like a statistic of this is how we measure impact. This is we've helped this percentage of people this year or blah blah blah. And that's great. And obviously prove that to your donors and whoever is funding you. But wow, like do you have a story to tell me about like these people that you've helped? Like, do these people feel, although maybe they have these new resources or whatever it may be, do these people feel like they were cared about during this process? Like how do you measure that? And I think that a lot of these conversations are based off of money and transactions and, a statistic, but people are, people. Like they're not numbers. And those things are important. And I don't blame them for that because again, I think nonprofits have to prove themselves, unfortunately. Sure. But I think that for these situations, partnerships are wonderful because you maybe don't have to have as many of these conversations, or you can fall back on something of, oh, okay, like I don't need to hire a new person for this and somehow find money for it. I can talk to this friend that I've made and they might be able to provide this for us we don't have to train someone. We don't have to do blah, blah, blah. We can just talk to this person and they might be able to help us out. And that's awesome.
For sure. And a lot of what you're talking about should and could happen at the board level. Like if you've assembled a great board and you build a board relationship that, again, is strategic and not transactional, then those are the areas that you can really lean on your board. I think the other challenge in this space is we have a leadership crisis and a board crisis. We have a leadership crisis in that there has not been a concerted amount of effort for leaders that have been in this nonprofit space for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They're leaving in droves and they haven't necessarily built a strong pipeline, a mentorship program to bring people up. So you have this massive gap in knowledge of people that have been doing something for a really long time, but haven't really done the succession work or the mentorship work to bring young people into decision making and understanding how to do these things and build these things, build community, work with boards. And so when you have new leaders come in, they're vastly unprepared, unfortunately, not their fault. They're vastly unprepared for the dynamics of what's happening today. And then on the board side, if you are just relying on your board to raise money, then that's probably one of the worst uses of a board, to be completely honest. Yes, there is some sort of requirement around how much money they should or could raise for you as a board member. But the reality is that as your board should be part of that strategic plan and how you hope to leverage those board partnerships, because they typically are all from various places and spaces and have different perspective and personalities and networks and all these other types of things that aren't necessarily solely thought of or should be thought of transactionally. They should be figuring out like, how can you start building these pieces together to build a much more holistic organization that's not just focused on raising $1, but building a strategic and a holistic organization that does all those, back to the beginning, right? Those mini micro mutually beneficial opportunities that build long-term scale and success. And so if you don't have leadership on the execution side, on the organization side, that does not know how to communicate and build a strategic relationship with the board, it's this really nasty cycle of, you have leaders who are challenged and are just need to be focused on money. The board's wondering where the money is, and then they're out, then they bring somebody else, and right. So it's just this thing where it's just this kind of negative, self-fulfilling like cycle of challenges for organizations. And I'm seeing that a lot. It's happening a lot right now, and it's accelerating given the challenges in federal funding. And so, again, my sincerest hope or my sincerest contribution is that we can have these strategic conversations to really figure out about how we can build a more holistic organization that leverages strategy first and then layers in tactics and transactions to support that strategy as opposed to the other way around.
I hope that is something that ends up happening too, because it is really upsetting to see the amount of panic in the nonprofit space right now, especially for leadership, because I think that, a lot of nonprofit leaders have been there for a while. And, if there's this funding crisis and maybe they can't afford to be paid, can't blame them sometimes for having to leave their positions or whatever it may be, because they have experience. They can always do something else. What I worry about is the phenomenon that you mentioned of like leaders being filling those positions that are maybe not trained in the way in which they should have been. What do you recommend as like a remedy for that? Like, how should nonprofits be different in kind of like uplifting new leaders, or like I guess training them, so to speak?
I think a lot, and this is generally speaking, I wouldn't say every organization is like this, but generally speaking, the vast majority of decision making is the transparency of that is locked in a boardroom. So maybe like the chief, the CEO or the executive director and the board are the ones making the decisions or having these conversations. And so the more that you can bring people of all sort of levels of an organization into a decision-making process or into a decision-making sort of conversation, that's where I've learned the most about how things work, right? Like if you don't see how like what conversations are happening, how decisions are made at organizations, why they're made, like just understand, almost like, lifting the hood, understanding like how the engine works. That's honestly step one of just like figuring out how you start to educate and get people more acclimated with how things work in an organization. Then they can then put their own unique personal spin on how they can contribute their time, talent, and treasure as a person of an organization to the decision-making process. And as they're more well aware of decisions that are being made, how they're being made, and the contributions that they can make, then they can do those. They can be proactive in doing that. And that's how you start to build trust. That's how you start to build sort of unique knowledge about your space. And ultimately, that's how you start leveling people up, is allowing people to understand how things are done, allow them to contribute to how they're done, and ultimately giving them more responsibility, more opportunities to contribute. Honestly, it is that simple. It sounds simple because it really is. The challenge is that I think there's a lot of people, again, it is what it is. It's not a ding on them or talking negative about it. It's just this is sort of the situation that we're in, is that a lot of people at a leadership perspective really want to hold tight to the decisions that are being made. I mean, I'm terrible at delegating, right? Like there's just a lot of things that at a leadership perspective are hard. And, when your job's on the line and when you're working with board and you're sort of beholden to board members and you're right, there's a lot of things that happen where it's not top of mind to bring people in or being comfortable to bring people in. And so again, that's the harder part. The solution is easy, doing it and getting, people comfortable and confident with allowing people to be a part of that conversation and sort of delegating and those types of things that, that's the hard part of the doing, but conceptually it's not that difficult.
Yeah, I definitely think that is, I think that is a lovely solution for the problem, because it's not something that's difficult. It's just something that is not done often. I think that there's a weird secrecy behind decision making in kind of any place, I suppose.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Nonprofits, it's something that never really made sense to me about why there would be secrecy. Like if you're doing the right thing, so to speak, then why is there secrecy around it? Like obviously everyone has to understand to a level that like there is money involved in this and we can't do everything that we want to all the time. But also, it doesn't make sense that you wouldn't be transparent about this with everyone, even like the interns. Like it doesn't make sense, because if you're going to understand the ins and outs of the company, you're going to grow and, be able to maybe become a leader someday. Like why not? I mean, there's nothing to hide. There shouldn't be, at least.
Sure. Well, ultimately, the thing that I always remember, or I try to remember, is being a human is hard. And leading with empathy is hard. And sometimes you can be empathetic and sometimes it's just really hard to do that. And some people don't have the capacity or haven't learned how to be empathetic or lead with empathy. And so the more empathetic leaders we can cultivate and the more empathetic leaders we can elevate to leadership positions, the more likely it is that people will understand that we all have to work together. And there are some things that I will do myself for sure. And there are also opportunities for me to bring people in to the decision-making process, to the decision-making conversations, so that everybody feels in some way, shape, or form that they'd contributed to the success. Or if it hasn't been successful, at least they had the opportunities to try really hard to contribute to that, right? Because if you take that agency away from people, it's like, well, why am I here? Nobody's listening to me. I'm seeing things being unsuccessful. I don't even get an opportunity or a chance to contribute to this. So why am I here? And it kind of contributes to that helpless feeling of not knowing what to do or how to be a part of it. So again, like, humaning's hard, empathy's hard. I acknowledge all that. And if we can figure out how to bring more empathetic people and cultivate more empathetic people to leadership positions, then ultimately the transparency piece, the conversation piece will be a lot easier. And you'll be able to see a lot more amazing things happen during that time.
I think that is a beautiful note to end on, because you went a little over time. But no, I think that was like truly a perfect point, because I do think that there needs to be more empathy in the world. And the people that are, honestly, not that the people at the top aren't empathetic, because I don't think they'd be able to do what they do if they're not, but the people that have the most like vigor are the people that are new, like the people that are like interning or like being like entry level, because they're still excited, like they haven't been destroyed by the system. And if you invite them and they feel heard about like decision making and different stuff like that, like even if you don't listen to everything possible or do everything that they suggest, like that maintains that passion. And I think that's so quickly shut down in the entirety of like the business world, the nonprofit world, whatever it may be. It's not welcomed often, and like new voices aren't. And I think that's at a detriment to having a passionate and empathetic leadership.
Totally. I'm gonna butcher this saying, but maybe this is a good way to leave. But I think Richard Branson, Virgin Group, said this, that train somebody so well they can get a job anywhere, but treat them so well they won't. Right? It's like that. It's that simple.
No, I completely agree. And I think that is like a great life lesson for anywhere. So I appreciate you sharing that. I also appreciate, I think this was a lovely conversation, not only about like what, could be better for the future in the nonprofit space, but also all these things that can benefit nonprofits. So I appreciate it. And I hope that our audience is able to get a lot out of this, especially our nonprofit population that is listening. So thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
It was absolutely wonderful. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope that you got great advice out of this, and I appreciate you guys participating. Thank you so much. And check us out next time.